fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to episode 177 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, joined by my co-host, Adnan Ikic. Adnan, how are we doing tonight?
Doing well. Ready to talk some draft.
All right.
Ready for some draft takes.
Yes. We got copious amounts of draft takes for you tonight because the Senior Bowl is in the rearview mirror. And to help us break it down, someone else who was with me in Mobile, he is Thor Nystrom, perhaps the best name on draft Twitter. If there's a better one, I haven't heard it so far. But Thor is at Thorku on Twitter, works for NBC Sports Edge. Thor, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Kev. How you doing?
Doing good. Happy to have you on. You know, I had to get Tyler all last week because you just couldn't finish your columns on time. So thankfully, we're all good this week. So yeah,
we learned last week that Tyler's better on deadline than Thor is, for sure.
Yes, for sure. But yeah, guys, we got lots of Senior Bowl takes to bring to you. We got some little Falcons nugs to get to later in the show. And of course, I'm sure you guys will have plenty of Falcons draft related questions, and we will get to those throughout as well. And Adnan, I know you weren't at the Senior Bowl. I know we talked about it earlier in the week, but if you have questions for us as well, obviously you get first dibs since you're actually on the show. If you have any specific players you want us to talk about or anything like that. But let's just kick it off. To me, we can talk about biggest winners, just the biggest sort of standouts. And I guess, there's two big ones that come to mind on the defensive side of the ball. It's Jermaine Johnson, right? A guy who was so good that he pulled out before the third day and the game. I've talked about Johnson on here a ton. Thor, what did you think about Johnson's week in Mobile? And are you, comfortable with me mocking him to the Falcons at 8? Because that's what I did today.
Oh, wow. That is bullish.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how good he was those first 2 days on Tuesday and Wednesday. Absolutely nobody there questioned the fact that he just walked away from the Thursday practice and the rest of the week. It's like, the thing about getting that tape in the can, and his tape the first 2 days in practice was dominant. There was no one there that could block him. He was ragdolling people, and I mean, he was consistently in the backfield. So if it's, dominating the one-on-ones as well. So I mean, like, what else are you going to do there? Everything that he needed to show, he showed. And specifically what I would say with that is, like, we already know that he is like this sort of power-based edge. And like what we were hoping to see, I'm going back to when he transferred in this past season, it was more diversification in that game, where it wasn't just like the hammer that only sees nails. And, one of the cool things in Mobile, you get to watch the one-on-ones, and, they're isolated. The matchups are isolated. And you got to see all these weapons that he has added to his arsenal, in terms of hand fighting, in terms of counter moves, all these different things. Because of the thunder that he comes downhill with, and the power that he can bring, and the bull rush and everything like that, you have to respect that, right? Like the offensive linemen, they have to make accommodations for that. And the more I liken it to like a pitcher that has one really, really good pitch, and we know he has like an awesome fastball. The more, off-speed pitches and breaking pitches that he adds to that, the harder it is for the lineman to sit dead red on what his specific strength is. So seeing that from Johnson, we absolutely saw that, those first 2 days. He was befuddling a lot of the guys, where they were sitting back trying to anchor on the power stuff. And then, he would have them going one way, going the other, and then, he could get them, adjust them for that. And then he'd do the power stuff. Those 2 days of practice were very impressive.
Yeah. I mean, it was, maybe a little rich to put him at 8. I understand that. I was just really excited to get another edge because I think I've mocked pretty much every edge to the Falcons now of the normal names. So getting another name in there, that was exciting to me personally from a column writing standpoint. But yeah, I mean, I think what you said, I absolutely agree with in that. He really showed some more parts of his game. Like, I think he showed more explosiveness. He showed off some ability to bend, which I don't think he was ever bad at that aspect, but it was like, is it good enough to be a common, move he can go to? And it was just something, his trajectory from the first game at FSU to now has gone up. Throughout the season, I thought he was playing with more energy, looked more comfortable, more explosive, more dominant. And then to come to the Senior Bowl, it's like the cherry on top where you're like putting it all together now. and looking even better. So it's just like, I love it. I love his fit for the Falcons in particular because as much as I like a guy like Karlaftis, who I think is just a really safe, high floor guy who's just going to be a good NFL pass rusher, and we all just sort of know and accept this. I think Jermaine Johnson offers you more ceiling. I think maybe Johnson's a better fit for the sort of 3-4 outside linebacker role that the Falcons are going to be wanting him to play. I don't know if they would ask Karlaftis to play more 5-tech or do a little bit of both. I mean, he certainly did stand up some at Purdue, but at his size, you just don't know if that's really something you're going to want him to do on like a regular basis. But I just love Johnson. I think he's so smart too. And obviously that's one of Karlaftis' biggest traits as well, is just he's so technically refined. But really interested in Johnson. Adnan, do you think 8 is too high for Johnson? I'm sure you've spent all day reading my mock draft because I know you just read my columns the minute they come out, right?
Oh, absolutely. No, I actually went into the editor beforehand, before it even published, just so that I can
looking
get
for that
quick
juicy mock. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I need it. I need at least one mock every time. I think 8 is a bit too high. Would not be against trading back and taking Johnson, but I've been saying it for the past, I don't even know however many years I've been on the show. I'm never against trading back in any draft, especially in this one where the Falcons have a lot of holes to plug up. So I wouldn't be thrilled with that pick at 8, but to go back a few spots into the mid-teens and to pick up another day 2 pick this season, and possibly another day 3 pick as well to really plug up those holes, I wouldn't be against it at all. Maybe not just outright at 8.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like I just keep mocking the same guys over and over again. So I'm excited to see Johnson. I think he should be in the conversation at 8. I don't know if I'll end up actually finishing with him above someone like a Jabo or even Karlaftis, but it'll be interesting. And then the other guy, Thor, who I know your boy Tyler is like a huge fan of, that on the offensive side had probably the biggest rise, would be Malik Willis at quarterback, who I'm not entirely sure the Falcons will be interested in at 8, but that could open up the door if other teams are interested in Malik Willis for the Falcons having more options in terms of a trade down or something of that nature. How did you think, or how did you feel about Malik Willis coming out of this week as he moved into your quarterback 1 spot?
Well, a couple of things. Let's be fair about something first. Malik rose more in Tyler's estimation because Malik was not quarterback 1 at Tyler's heading into the week.
Right.
I was proselytizing for Malik the whole time. Malik has been my QB1. I think Tyler went in with Strong. I would have to ask him still if it's
he
the
loves
same
Strong.
thing. Yeah. But Malik Willis, for me, any side of the ball, he's the biggest riser, right? Because you have the biggest band of outcomes already for quarterbacks. You have the biggest tax that you pay for quarterbacks. And coming into this week, there was, a big differing of opinions, right? Like, he was my QB1, but, I would say, there was still that quagmire of 5 or 6, at the top. And for other people, even, I know PFF had him rated 5th coming into the week. They weren't the only ones. He was Willis was between 4 and 6 on a ton of boards coming in, but those guys as well, they would say those top 5 or 6 guys were fairly closely grouped, in totality or whatever. So a jump from being the 6th quarterback to the first one, you're talking about potentially from a 3rd round pick in this class all the way, who knows how high that could go into the first round. And for me, Malik Willis did that. That was the sort of stock rise that you see. You see these guys, only a couple every year, but they go into the Senior Bowl and it's just, they drop their wallet on the table, we'll say. And I'm the guy. And you just see the stock go up. And Kev, we talked a lot about this in Mobile, but for me, what Malik did performance-wise in a vacuum, it was impressive, right? Just, being the most impressive quarterback there out of the 6, just in a vacuum, don't consider the context. That's impressive in and of itself. But when you consider the context of it, it was way, way, way more impressive because, like we talked about, the NFL Combine is the event that is tailored around Malik Willis's skill set. where it's the one-off, things of like arm strength and athleticism and all these different things. He's going to dominate, the NFL Combine. He's going to be the winner of the NFL Combine. The Senior Bowl was supposed to be the event where, the odds were stacked against him. This event where you had to play almost entirely within structure. If you're a quarterback, pro style structure, by the way, a lot of stuff under center, taking snaps from there. And then without use of his legs, we did get to see that awesome run, on Saturday in the game, but on majority of the sessions on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you weren't really supposed to be using your legs. You're supposed to also be giving reps to the wide receivers and the defensive backs and putting the ball in the air. And again, from within the pocket. And despite the fact that Malik Willis, so much of his value comes from outside of structure, and so much of his value comes from his legs or from the threat of his legs, and you remove those things, and he was still far and away the best quarterback in Mobile. That if it didn't open your eyes, you have your eyes open. They're not capable of seeing the truth.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it was always sort of, he was one of the guys, I think I went back and read my like pre-Senior Bowl column on the quarterbacks to watch, and I was like, Malik Willis is the biggest wild card. He could flame out and be like, a late day 2 pick, or he could hit it and he'll be, the top quarterback, because that's sort of who he is. Like, he's got a really special arm to the point where, like, yes, we all know his mechanics are all over the place. Like, it's bad. Like, it's not great. But it doesn't matter for a lot of these throws because he's just so naturally talented. He doesn't even need to have a great base or great footwork to get the ball where it needs to go. And like you mentioned, the athleticism, I think a lot of people were sort of expecting him to take off and run more often. And you're right, he didn't really do it all the time in Mobile. I mean, there's certainly a couple of good runs on tape that he put out there. But for the most part, he did play, like you said, within structure, and had the most impressive throws of the day on day 1 when all the quarterbacks sort of were off. And then he's just sort of carried that momentum all the way through and got better and better as the week went on. But yeah, I mean, I think with Malik Willis, it's all about what kind of quarterback you're interested in. If you're interested in ceiling, that's the guy, like, without a doubt. It's the guys with the top ceilings, Malik Willis and Desmond Ridder, and it's pretty, Malik Willis had a better week than Desmond Ridder, certainly. And, I'm definitely still team Desmond Ridder in the second, but, if somebody's considering a quarterback in the top 10 right now, I think it has to be Willis or Kenny Pickett, and they're just sort of very different prospects.
Yeah. Well, just speaking of Ridder, there's some, times where you say like, this guy punched his ticket into round 1. And by the way, some of my media brethren won't say this. I'll just say this right now. Malik Willis punched his ticket into round 1 in Mobile.
Yeah.
We don't know how high he's going to go yet. Promise you guys he's going in round 1. I think sort of the opposite about Ridder. I think he punched his ticket of not being in round 1. I think he, I think that one's over. I could see him still, going in the top half of that second round for sure. But some of the issues with accuracy and placement that we had seen on tape, they sort of reared their ugly head. We saw it on Tuesday, Wednesday under the rain, whereas Malik with his, it was like his physical ability, it was sort of transcending the environmental conditions of that, where the ball was, obviously always shoots out of his hand, but you particularly saw it in that rain where, like, his arm strength wasn't affected and his accuracy almost seemed to even get better, where Ridder, both his touch and his accuracy and his placement, those sorts of things. Whereas on day 1, they were not great at all.
Yeah.
On day 2, in those conditions, they depreciated even more, to the point where you saw one aspect of Ridder's game that I've been, that sort of scares me about Ridder is a risk aversion. He has the arm, and he has the athleticism, but like, he only is sort of testing it and pushing it when he thinks he has the best of it. Like he needs to see the wide receiver open, sort of a thing. And on Wednesday, we saw him trying to get out of the pocket and scramble more, where again, these practices are more about winning from structure, etc. You saw him sort of bailing to that more than you saw Malik doing that in those conditions. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it took really until the 3rd day of practice for Ridder to get comfortable, which is certainly, compared to Willis, who I think excelled on all 3 days, is why I have, Willis higher than Ridder. And Willis is my new quarterback 1 too. I mean, just because I grade based on what I think the Falcons need, and I just have Willis higher because I don't necessarily see the point in taking Kenny Pickett because I don't think he's really an upgrade on Matt Ryan in the next 3 to 4 years. I mean, I think he's probably about what Matt Ryan is. And Matt Ryan right now, not even peak Matt Ryan. And maybe Pickett could get to that, but I just don't see it right now. But Willis could be an upgrade on Matt Ryan in a year or 2 years. Day one, I don't think so, but he would be going to such a perfect situation in Atlanta that it is tempting. Same thing with Ritter, and especially if it is at a cheaper price tag of like a early possibly, but especially if it's one of their later second round picks. It's just such a low risk pick that could potentially
the Falcons.
hit.
The Falcons don't even need to make the Malik Willis pick for it to be indirectly beneficial to them, for him to rise up the draft boards, because from Atlanta's perspective, if the Falcons don't go quarterback in round one, which I don't think that they will this season, maybe next year, but you want as many quarterbacks to go as possible ahead of you in that case, because that's just going to push premium talent at other positions down, into your lap at 8. Like if Desmond Ritter can rise all the way up to possibly Malik Willis, not Desmond Ritter. If you could move all the way up to possibly 2 or 3 where the Texans are, maybe the Giants give them a look at 5 or 7, that would still be a very good outcome for the Falcons, because then all of a sudden you could have a Kyle Hamilton that falls into your lap. You could have, I don't know if Evan Neal will get down there, but someone like that who you're not expecting to fall outside of the top 5 to fall down to 8, maybe even Kayvon Thibodeau, given what we've been hearing about him lately.
That would be ridiculous. Yeah. But I mean, yes, I mean, I totally agree with you there. And, so to you, Adnan, even with the Malik Willis hype, I think you're still, I mean, and I'm not saying I necessarily want them to take Malik Willis at 8 either, but would it shock you if they did consider a quarterback at 8?
I wouldn't shock me if they considered it, especially after Arthur Blank's comments today about, how the great teams all have a succession plan in place for after their franchise quarterbacks go off into the sunset. But I just think that Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot see Matt Ryan as someone who still has at least 2 or 3 good years left. And I think that they view this as a bit too early to go after a quarterback. But if they do take a Malik Willis at 8, then that'll just tell me that they see him as the guy, as the future franchise guy, because you're pretty much committing to sitting him probably for a couple years.
Yeah, at least one, and then they would have a choice to make next year with Matt Ryan and his contract and stuff like that. Also, depending on what they do with Matt Ryan's contract this year. But yeah, I mean, they chose to pass on Justin Fields, who I was a big fan of. How would you rank Malik Willis versus last year's quarterback class, Thor?
I put him above Mac Jones for sure.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, my rankings were a little bit different than some other folks. I had Zach Wilson 4. I probably would have Malik, like where I end up grading him would probably be slightly ahead of Zach Wilson. So I guess if you were to combine the two classes, he probably would have been QB4 for me between the both.
That's exactly what I would have said, because I had Trevor Lawrence 1, Justin Fields 2. And then, yeah, I would also have Malik Willis over Zach Wilson, just because I thought Zach Wilson was just kind of risky, and I just, not that he can't be a good quarterback, but just, I didn't see him as good as those other two guys. And I think I like Malik Willis's ceiling better too. So yeah, we actually have, I don't know if that's how you had it too. I
it is. Yeah, man. I had Lance 3. Yeah.
Yeah. The Lance was the other guy I was forgetting, but yeah. Yeah, we actually had the exact same rankings. I knew I liked you for some reason.
Great minds, Kev.
Yeah. But, they did end up going with Pitts, which I don't think any Falcons fans could really be that upset with. I mean, Pitts is such a transcendent talent. It's hard to be angry with that. Like, if you get a Hall of Famer, it's like you could argue, like, oh, well, Justin Fields turns into a Pro Bowler. It's like, well, if you got a Hall of Famer, just shut up. Like, be happy. Like, you got a Hall of Famer, or however good Pitts is. It's like, you're unlikely to ever be upset with that pick. So I'm comfortable with that. But, we'll see if they do end up going quarterback, whether that's Willis, or I think it's probably more likely, especially if Ritter is there later in the second, I think that's when they would probably like to pick him up. I don't think they're necessarily going to go after him earlier than that. But, in that way, maybe Ritter's week, kind of scattershot week actually helps the Falcons if they did want to take him in round 2. So we'll see if that pays off. But we do know that Arthur Smith was talking to Luke Fickell for like at least half an hour, and that could be about anyone. But we also know that the Falcons interviewed Ritter on the first possible day. So there's clearly some interest, but how serious, who knows at this point. But another guy I really wanted to talk to that I loved, that also had a great game in the Senior Bowl game, which, as we all know, is the most important part of Senior Bowl week, right? Perrion Winfrey from Oklahoma. First of all, I didn't realize he measured in with 86-inch arms, because that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But what did you think about Perrion Winfrey? And do you think he's like for sure a first rounder at this point?
Man, if he's not, it's top like 40. But yeah, for me, I think I will have him in my top 32 of all the, like Willis, like my comment before about him being the biggest riser, that was in terms of, my perception of, where the industry had these guys coming in. Winfrey, if you were just like looking at my personal ones, he probably would have rose the most. He was the guy that opened my eyes the most. Just so disruptive. You mentioned the length. He also has the explosion. Yeah. He gets his hands on you really quick, and he's off the ball really quick, and he's just so friggin' active. There is stretches in the team. They do the one-on-one drills, and then they'd switch it over to the team things. And there is stretches on Tuesday and Wednesday where they could not block him with one guy, and he was just blowing up reps so early that they couldn't even get the whole rep off. So they had to start double teaming Perrion Winfrey as a matter of course. And Perrion Winfrey the whole time was just woofing at whoever he beat, or he comes swaggering over to the sideline. He's one of those guys that really gets his teammates jacked up. Like he'll make a play and let everybody know it. Or if he finds a weak link on that offensive line, he's going to let everyone know about it. He impressed the crap out of me, both, his attitude. You saw like the humbleness that he accepted some of the accolades that he got at the end of the week, because he got a whole bunch of, I think he was named MVP of the whole week. A very, very, very humble kid, but on the field, for me, I think I used this verbiage too in a column, but a thermonuclear reactor of energy for everyone around him. Yeah.
And we know the Falcons love players like that too. That's one of the things that Fontenot has sort of emphasized as one of his key things that he looks for, is guys with a lot of energy and that bring, a lot of positivity to the team. Adnan, I don't know if there were any defensive players that you heard of that you were liking in terms of hopefully seeing the Falcons draft, or anyone that you had additional questions on.
I did have a question on one, the Minnesota pass rusher, Boye Mafe.
Oh, yes.
I know that he's someone that, it's not going to go in the first round, but I know he had a pretty impressive week. And, that's someone who the Falcons have a couple of second-round picks, maybe someone Atlanta could go after if they decide to go after, another position, sans pass rusher in the first round. So, just what were your guys' thoughts on him last week at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, Boye was awesome. Day one, a little slow, but then he just started getting better. And then I think he was like one of the best players in the game. I only caught like half of it, but I still saw him make like at least 2 sacks or something like that. So yeah, Mafe allegedly is going to test like insanely well. And he definitely looked like it on the field. He's just like super explosive, sort of a prototypical guy. Raw, but I mean, some people were saying he's a first rounder now, which I'm too much of a coward to do that. But my boldness stops at Jermaine Johnson at 8. But Thor, what do you think about Boye? I mean, yeah, if he's there in the second round, absolutely, I love him. I think he's a guy that's got his best football ahead of him for sure. But Thor, where do you sort of land on Boye at this point?
Yeah, I mean, your point's well taken. It's correct that his best football's in front of him. He is an absolute super freak of an athlete. He's been on the Bruce Feldman Freak List, and he is spoken of in hallowed grounds around the Minnesota weight room, because it's just the things that he can do there, it's ridiculous. With his frame, the 40, and then with the bench, the squat, the power clean, like all that different stuff. He's a physical freak. on the field, and this goes for, the last couple of years of his college career. I was fortunate enough to have quite a bit of exposure to him because I live in the Twin Cities. I watch a lot of Gopher games live. You see that where it's like, you'll see some ridiculous flash plays where it's like, oh my God, like high end NFL plays. Like there's not too many edge rush. There's not too many humans walking the earth that could do what he just did. But then you'll also see the long stretches where he sort of disappears, or where, he loses his gap integrity, doesn't seal that edge. And, the other team's able to rip off, a run to that side or whatever, Hassan Haskins or whoever in the Big Ten, attacking him or whatever. So you'd see that up and down a little bit. And you alluded to this, like we saw that in the Senior Bowl. Mafe was a guy I was certainly watching, along with Falele and some of these other guys I had more exposure to, just to be, just out of personal interest. And that first day on Tuesday, Mafe did not acquit himself well. It was like he was, where the other guys had cleats on, a couple of these different reps, it seemed like he had ice skates on or something. He wasn't keeping his balance out there. That first explosive step wasn't there. He wasn't getting on top of guys like he is when he's on. But coming out Wednesday, and maybe this is just him playing in Minnesota and liking the elements going the other way. He doesn't like the good weather. He plays up in the bad weather. But that Wednesday day, the downpour, Malik Willis, he was truly the star where his game, went up in those conditions. But Mafe on the defensive end, on the defensive side, he would be one of the guys that I would point to the other way, where his game clearly went up. And what was bizarre about it is the day before, in perfect conditions, like I said, he was losing his balance a couple of times, and he had stuff like that. Whereas on Wednesday, in these crappy conditions, he was just licking offensive tackles off the edge. Like he was getting into the backfield, bam, 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 bam. And that carried over into Thursday, when then you went to the sort of anesthetized conditions where you were under the roof and everything like that. And then, of course, in the game as well, he just in terms of the package, in terms of like the overall eval, just because it's recently, reminds you a little bit of Kwity Paye. Kwity Paye was a bit better in college, but it's the same sort of thing of just freak athleticism in just about the same package. So, I think of him as just a bit rawer version of that, but the upside is absolutely back half of the first round, like where his ceiling is. And it's just going to become about risk threshold for some of these teams, as far as where he ends up going. But he could certainly help his cause quite a bit by doing in Indianapolis what I think he's going to do, which is just blow the roof off the whole place.
Yeah, that's why I think some people are starting to mock him in the first, because it's sort of expected that he's just going to blow it up, and he will. And we've seen teams just chase that upside, especially teams of the late first, because these are the teams that are in the playoffs. They probably have the patience to be able to be like, look, if this guy takes a year, we're willing to wait. We can wait it out. Whereas teams in the earlier part of the draft are like, we need someone right now. So, yeah, he's definitely someone who helped himself and is a very intriguing guy. I would love to see in Atlanta, but we'll have to see if he lasts long enough for them to get a shot at him in the second round. But moving back to the offensive side, real quick, guys, just wanted to remind you to please like and subscribe if you haven't done that already. We really appreciate those metrics. You can check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. Our next Falcons fan Q&A session is tomorrow night. It'll be at 5 p.m. Eastern. So if you're not a patron and you'd like to take part in that, you can follow that link. Just sign up anytime before tomorrow night at 5 to get access to that. And that will also be up. The recording of that will be up on the channel later tomorrow night as well. And if you guys have any particularly burning questions, you can donate at the link, which is, I think it's streamlabs.com/Falcoholic. But check the show description for that, and we will try to get to we will obviously get to those, and then I know a lot of other people have questions. We will try to get to those as well, as many as we can. So thanks again for listening, folks. But yeah, on offense, there were a lot of guys that really stood out. At wide receiver, there's two, my son Calvin Austin that we'll get to in a minute, but the other one was Christian Watson from North Dakota State. What did you think about him, Thor? And I know some people are getting really frisky with where they're mocking him, but where would you sort of have him in your rankings right about now? Yeah,
for me, he was probably the second biggest winner of the event, in terms of where he went to where, now, like, maybe I shouldn't make this joke again, but coming into the event, I think you know where I'm going, Kev. Todd McShay had him ranked as wide receiver 31.
Yes, famously.
Yes. And, which would have put him, dang near, seventh rounder UDFA territory. But that was never reality, of course. But just objectively, I think around the industry, he would have been seen as more of a middle rounder coming into this past week. And for me, I think he's a potential top 50 pick, absolutely now, because I know that he's going to, in Indianapolis, at 6'4", 212 pounds or whatever he is, I know he's going to either run a high 4.3s or a low 4.4s. So I know that. I also know that he wins downfield regularly. I also know that he's a very, very good gadget player out of the backfield. I also know that he gives effort every single running play as a blocker. And we saw that. On film, you can for sure see it, and like in any issue, every single kid's got a block, and so you can see that on film. But like to see it at an all-star event like that, it really stood out, where a receiver's 30 yards downfield and acting as a lead envoy when Rashad White or Tyler Beatty breaks off a long run in practices. That kid, Christian Watson, competes every single play. But what we also saw in Mobile, the one thing I think that raised his, or sent his arrow up even more, because the other stuff was more or less a given if you had watched him in advance. But the one thing that I think he added to the plate there was the work over the intermediate area of the field. And the fact that he didn't have the biggest catalog of this at NDSU, it wasn't necessarily his fault, right? Like he did all these other things within that offense, encouraging the safeties to go back and the deep stuff. And, the gadget stuff that was added later on and the run block and stuff like that. But like, winning in the intermediate area of the field as a receiver, for instance, it wasn't as big of a part of his job description. And we saw in Mobile that he could absolutely do that. Like, and I'm just talking more of the meat and potato stuff. I'm not talking about the stuff that just flashes out, off the, like these 50-yard bombs, like we saw, the receiving end from Trey Lance, on tape so many times. But like, just the simple stuff of like the button hooks or the slants or different stuff like that. Like, catching the ball there in traffic. Like I knew that he could win in contested situations downfield. Right. Like, he has so many reps of that, catching those just dime balls, those bombs from Trey Lance, like, 50, 60 yard downfield. But the stuff of picking around traffic in the intermediate area, catching the ball around bodies, knowing he's going to get hit, stuff like that. His hands were very sticky all week. He ran crisp routes in the intermediate areas, some stuff we didn't see as much on the tape. And he won there. And he was probably the most reliable receiver just in terms of reliability. All week, where the quarterback can throw it his way and know it's going to get caught. So huge stock up week for Christian Watson.
Yeah, I loved that, and he just seems tailor made for Arthur Smith's offense to me. Like, great run blocker. He screams sort of AJ Brown to me, in that he's a great run blocker. He can do some gadgety stuff. He's a tremendous deep threat. He's got the size that you look for. So I'm just like, oh yeah, Arthur Smith's going to want this guy. If he's around in the second round, that's definitely someone they're going to circle. Adnan, I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in too. Did you have any receivers or other offensive players that you wanted to know more information about, or really like what you've heard so far coming out of the Senior Bowl?
Zion Johnson, the interior offensive lineman out of Boston College. Someone who I probably is going to go in the first round. Very likely. I don't think that he'll make it to the Falcons in the second. Yeah. But definitely a name of intrigue, especially since I'm really looking at these offensive linemen, and the Falcons really, really need a guard, because it would be a sin to roll with Jalen Mayfield again after what we saw last season if he doesn't vastly improve over the offseason.
Yeah, Zion, I think, was a lot of people's best offensive lineman of the week. Obviously he has played at tackle. A lot of people believe he's best at guard, which I concur with. He also played center at the Senior Bowl, and he looked like he could snap just fine. So he's like a true 5-position guy. Obviously, I think he's best at guard. But Thor, what did you think about Zion? I don't think he's making it to the second round. I agree with what Adnan said.
Iron like a lion in Zion. No, just kidding. He caused many, grown men to fall in love on the post Wednesday practice as me and Tyler were running for the Uber, and as all the media were fleeing, up, because we've been staying in the rain for like 5 hours, and then all the players were running up, to the dressing room or whatever, get out of that crap. But Zion stayed in that downpour to practice his snaps, practice his shotgun snaps and stuff like that. And oh my God, you want to talk about something that is going to ingratiate yourself to NFL scouts like that, besides Malik Willis's day, just the mere fact that Zion stayed after practice in that downpour when he didn't have to do those snaps was probably like the one thing where everyone's like, oh my God, what's up with this kid? He showed a lot. I mean, that stuff was just sort of ancillary, but and a cute anecdote. But what was more telling about it to me is that he was, while we know that he is a dominant guard, that he was willing to try out this new position in such a high leverage tryout position, right? Like people got to understand, this is literally the biggest job interview of all those kids' lives. Right. And so like, it's like in a job interview, even when people ask you something negative, you always spin it into a positive, like, hey, Thor, what's the worst thing about you at work? Oh, it's that I work too hard and I care too much. You know what I mean? But like, all these guys, they were just trying to put themselves into the best possible, what behooved their skill set the best. And Zion, like, he was like, well, yeah, I'm the best guard here for sure. But, someone didn't invite enough centers, or there was a dearth of centers at the event. And so Zion was like, F it. Like, I'm down. Like, I'll do this. And, even at risk of struggling there, where you're shifting over to this other thing. And, we talked some about these kids that like, they had good tape and then they walked away, which I had no problem with at all. And I don't want to insinuate, that I do, but the opposite of that is taking yourself out of your comfort zone in that enormous job interview pressure sort of situation and doing something outside of your comfort zone. And not only that, he was doing it in those just awful conditions on Wednesday. That was the day that absolutely should have been inside. And Zion was like doing the shotgun snaps and all that. And outside of that, he, just in the one-on-ones and just in the meat and potato blocking stuff, he dominated all week. He for sure was the best offensive lineman there. But like that other thing of not only, taking to center very quickly, but even just the mere fact of putting himself out there in that spot and outworking other people on, in those 72 hours. I think that proved a lot to the NFL. And I think that improved the stock as well.
Yeah, I agree. He was very impressive. I think he was definitely the most consistent lineman, even without the extra stuff. So I think he has cemented himself as a first-round pick and probably the top, maybe not the top. I know a lot of people really love Kenyon Green, and obviously there's Tyler Linderbaum, but he's certainly in contention for that top spot. But yeah, it's tough there. But yeah, the other guy I really wanted to talk about at wide receiver was Calvin Austin, the third from Memphis, who is just a lot of fun. He's not, I think, in the same tier of like potential wide receiver one that Christian Watson is, but in terms of a really possibly good wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 type, like a complementary guy, he showed that he can do it all. He can separate with his routes. He can get off the line, beat press with his quickness. He was showing off some run after catch stuff. He was a deep threat. I mean, he can do it all. If he was 6'4", 212, he'd be like a top 20 pick. Like it's just he's 5'7", 175. So he doesn't have the size necessarily, but he was just really fun to watch. What did you think about Calvin Austin? And do you think he's a for sure day 2 pick now, or people are going to be afraid of that size?
I mean, like the size is for sure a concern. The other one was, and this is where I think he won this week, was, we talked about it there, the athleticism, the playmaking with the ball in your hands, once you turn up field, the fluidity, and then his ability to just chunk yards after that. That stuff was a given. My question about Calvin Austin coming into this week was about his hands, number one, and then his ability to catch the ball with anyone near in his vicinity, right? Because in college, it was so easy for him to get separation. Now, the last year of college, he wasn't playing with the best quarterback, so that was sort of playing against him. But the separation came easy to him, and so you started to wonder, like, in the pros, when it's not quite as easy, is that something that's going to be possible for him? He had some drops last year. And in the contested situation with bodies around him, he wasn't quite as good. That's where he acquitted himself the best for me, where it was like, oh, this kid actually can do some of this stuff. I saw him in the intermediate sector a couple of different times, catching balls outside of his frame, plucking it with his hands. One time he slammed on the brakes and he was able to get his hands back and catch it outside of his frame. Yeah. And these were with guys on him, right? Like, a very competitive environment. And so merely just making those catches, again, because the other stuff, it's not a question for me, right? Like, when we talk about, like, he answered questions at the Senior Bowl. We're talking about specific things, right? Like these very specific. Can this kid do that? Does this part translate, or is this where the downfall is going to be? In his evaluation, and at least Austin in that environment against some very physical, very physically impressive type cornerbacks, he acquitted himself better than I thought he would in terms of the hands and in terms of catching the ball around other folks.
Yeah, I agree, and he's someone that I definitely like on day 2. Later on day 2, but I think the Falcons just need everything. And even if they needed him to be their short yardage, yards at, run after catch sort of guy, and, deep threat complementary player, like I think that would be helpful. They add Christian Watson and Calvin Austin. Now we're starting, add those two to Kyle Pitts, and now we're starting, maybe to get the building blocks of a reinvigorated receiving group here. But
hey, let's get Malik there first, and then let's get Christian Watson, and let's just have the chuck and duck offense, right? Like send those guys deep, and how are you going to defend that spacing?
Right.
If you're going to have to defend Malik, horizontally, and then those couple guys vertically, we could have some issues for the defense.
Yeah, no, that would be very much a fun thing to watch, and I'm down. If we could somehow get, all 3 of those guys to Atlanta without dark magic, maybe even with dark magic, I would consider it. But I would have to know, the terms of the magic spell we were casting. But just to, on the surface, maybe not. But, I'm wary of dark magic. But, getting away from the magic, Adnan, running back is another spot that Falcons fans are really interested in. Are there any running backs in particular you're sort of watching? Anyone you wanted us to talk about?
I know your main guy, and you had him as your biggest winner, was Dameon Pierce. Beyond that, someone like a Jerome Ford from Cincinnati. I know the Falcons. Arthur Smith really likes his physical runners. He doesn't like that, those smallish guys who can't really take the hits behind his scheme and his system. So I don't know. I think Ford is possibly someone that the Falcons could be looking at in those middle rounds. I don't think he'll go in the first couple rounds, but that's definitely a name on my radar, Jerome Ford.
Yeah, I thought Ford had a pretty good week. Dameon Pierce sort of stole the show as a guy that didn't really get utilized well in college, but showed he could do it all. Showed he was physical, good pass blocker, good pass catcher, physical runner. Pierce I was probably the highest on coming out, especially relative to people just sort of, I think, had him sort of pegged as like just a guy and like a sort of, mid day 3 player, where now he might have worked his way even into the late day 2 discussion. Jerome Ford I thought did have a pretty good week overall too. Another guy was Rashad White, who's over 6 foot 200. So he does meet some of the size requirements that Arthur Smith likes. Another good option. But Thor, who were some of your guys at running back this week too?
I thought Pierce acquitted himself very well. From watching that, crap show of a team, last year, and then, his limited run before, he was one of the guys that I was bullish on. And so, just from what I had seen of him. So for me, the guys that, I guess the way that I was wrong on coming in, I was wrong on Tyler Beatty. He was one of those guys that just in my perception went way up because, coming in, it was like, what's this guy's fit at the next level? He was like, the smaller back who handles ridiculous volume, right? Like both as a runner and as a receiver. And I just didn't know, is he a quadruple A player, to use baseball parlance, or is there, stuff that he can do that will translate it into a, consistent role at the NFL level. And he really impressed me there, with his all around skill set. He's a little puzzle for defenses to solve every single time. He's got good vision. He seems to understand angles very well. And he has that little thing where he can like hide behind the line, and all of a sudden he just squirts out. You're like, where is he? And he just all of a sudden he just squirts out, and he's like 5 yards downfield. It's that sort of a thing. I became way more bullish that his skill set is going to translate. The one thing with him that well, not that you worry about, you just have to know, because it's not going to get any better. He sucks as a pass blocker. That's something that, for instance, Dameon Pierce, he don't got a problem with. Dameon Pierce, he got the whole skill set there. But for a team that's specifically looking to for a change of pace back that can also function as a third down back, in terms of the receiving element, I thought Beatty acquitted himself well. And the other guy that I don't think that I was as high on, or he opened my eyes up a little bit more, was Rachaad White, because I knew that Rachaad White was a very good receiving back. And the other stuff, especially like between the tackles and stuff like that, and maybe it was just, hearkening back to some of these other Arizona State running backs, like Kalen Ballage, who ran like he had drunk goggles on, sort of ran like a Mr. Magoo type, even though he, physically, was crazy athletic. But with Rachaad White, and like I said, maybe some of this is internal bias when you're watching them or whatever. But the vision between the tackles and stuff like that, on film at least heading in, I didn't know that he had those sorts of things, or that he could run with sort of patience and nuance behind the line. And those were the things that he opened my eyes up to a little bit more, that he could do more of the meat and potatoes type running back stuff, in addition to the very good receiver that he is.
Yeah. I definitely liked White a lot from this draft. Batty is a guy that I like too, probably more as a complimentary piece, but he did definitely show this year that he can run the ball, whereas before he was more of a receiving specialist. He finally ended up getting a lot of carries this year, and was pretty efficient with them. I know a lot of people are asking about Brian Robinson, and it may not be a popular take, but I think Brian Robinson's just a guy as a runner. I mean, there's definitely things to like about him. He's big. I think he has solid actual long speed, but he's a good pass protector too. He showed that this week. But like as a runner, I just don't think he's all that special. But what do you think about Brian Robinson, Thor?
I agree. Yeah, I mean, you saw it on this past year's Alabama team. He finally got his shot. He'd sat behind a lot of kids, and this year he finally gets his shot. And for most of the season, Alabama's running game was way, way down in comparison to where it usually is. And, he might have gotten people more excited about his NFL sort of evaluation because they happened to see him in that game against Cincinnati, where Alabama's offensive line was sort of hammering down. Yeah. And when you give him when you give Robinson the 3-yard head start, he's a really big rock that you kick down the hill, right? And the further he goes down, the more momentum he's going to pick up. And so if you can give him those few yards, he's great, right? And we're going downhill now. But outside of that, like I said, in comparison to the talent around him last season, I wasn't terribly impressed. And in Mobile is the same sort of a thing. He's a big back. He can grind a bit. And like you said, he'll stick his nose in, when a kid's coming down blitzing. But there's no dynamic element to his game. There's no differentiating factor. It's like it's sort of like a Bo Scarborough pre-injury kind of a thing, or PFF had a comp. They put out their draft guide right before I got on my plane back from Mobile. I was like, yes, I got something to read on the way back. Yeah. Their comp for him caught my eye. I was like, oh yeah, actually I can see that. I love when comps do that, where you're like, oh yeah, I remember that kid. Yeah. That is. They comped him to Carlos Williams. Remember that kid from Florida State? Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah. I can see those guys trading places. Yeah. So it's a big dude that has a bit of athleticism. You mentioned some of that straight line speed. But the thing is Robinson so infrequently gets that runway where it's just, if he was more physical and he could break more tackles, or if he was more agile, stuff like that, and maybe he could get, that head of steam more often. I think you'd see more utility in that. But he's just, for me, he's going to be, more on the low end of an NFL running back, I think.
Yeah, I think he's going to have a roster spot. I mean, he's probably going to be a good special teamer for you too, but I don't think he's someone you're circling as like, we need to go get this guy. I think, I know Corey Carter is saying he runs well between the tackles, and I think he does, but I think there's a lot of backs in this class that I would rather have?
Well, yeah, and that's the least valuable like singular thing in the NFL, right? Because there's so little differentiation between the performance of guys running between the tackles. I mean, Kev, you would average a yard and a half at least, behind just going between the tackles.
If we had a good offensive line, I could fall forward. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, yes, he can do that, and he can, again, he's not going to embarrass himself pass blocking, but when you're talking about the NFL, they have access to every talent, right? Like both in the draft to improve, but always the street free agents. So if you're not differentiating yourself in some area of the game, you're going to get replaced. And the between the tackle grinder guy who will do a little pass blocking, they're the least valuable of the phylum of running backs. You'd rather have it on the complete other side, where it's like a guy who's a good receiver but doesn't do anything else. That's more valuable than the between the tackle grinder guy.
Yeah, I think so. All right, we're coming up on an hour now. I don't want to keep you super long, Thor, if you got places to be, but is there any other players that you wanted to touch on before we sign off? Anyone else that stood out to you in a big way?
Trying to think here. At running back, this isn't standard. Maybe it's sort of the opposite way. A guy that I was not as impressed with as some other people there, apparently, because he looked like he won some accolades. But Abram Smith, I didn't think had as good of a week as sort of the public did. Another sort of between the tackles grinder guy that doesn't catch the ball very well. I thought, especially early on in the week, he looked a bit sluggish. In terms of wide receivers at the event. Khalil Shakir is a guy who started slow, finished strong during the week. So, he had a nice little uptick there at the end. Romeo Dubes, he didn't do too much during the week. Sort of disappointed there. Velus Jones, Tyler's boy, he didn't do a ton, but then during the game he blew up. So Tyler he was all bashful about that. The other couple kids I would point at tight end, Jeremy Ruckert had, he was another guy that practiced the first 2 days, and then he said that they said he had an injury going into the Thursday practice. I don't know if that was the case or not. He may have just decided to stand on the first 2 days of practice, but he may have been the most impressive tight end on the field during those first 2 days. And then just, I almost don't even need to say this, but Trey McBride just sort of confirmed for everyone out there that he was tight end 1 in this class.
Yeah, exactly. Because when I did my biggest winners, I put Ruckert over Trey McBride, but then I was like, Trey McBride was probably still, if not the second best tight end. But I think Ruckert's a bigger winner because I think it was sort of expected that Trey McBride would just sort of be the best tight end. And Ruckert, I think we needed to see a little bit from him because of how, I guess, poorly Ohio State used him. They just didn't really use him at all, which I guess I understand when you have 3 first-round wide receivers, but still, it would have been nice. But yeah, I think he has the potential to just go on and have this way, way better professional career. I sent Ruckert to the Falcons in my mock today in the 3rd round, and people were pissed. They were like, "Oh, how dare you draft a backup tight end?" At 73. I'm like, Ruckert's not a backup tight end. If you know Arthur Smith's offense, the second tight end is a starter, and Kyle Pitts is going to be playing wide receiver probably at least 30% of the time anyway, so you need another good tight end. And I think there's a chance he does make it to the 3rd, and he's going to be well worth that pick. He could end up being the best tight end in this class, as much as I love Trey McBride. Ruckert may have a higher ceiling due to his athleticism. So
I don't have any problem with taking him in the 3rd round. I don't think, and to your point as well, that's a 2 tight end offense, or if you want to call Kyle Pitts a big slot, or a wide guy, when he goes all wide. Either way, if you're considering Kyle Pitts a tight end, then it's a 2 tight end offense. That's just period.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It just says.
Yeah. People are just gonna have to get over it. So
get over it.
Get over it, guys.
You got a generational talent. Get over it.
Yeah. Adnan, did you have any other questions for Thor before we're gonna do some very Falcon centric discussion? I don't know if you necessarily want to be a part of that, but Adnan, did you have any other questions for Thor before he takes off?
Just a Falcon-centric question, just very broad, very general. Falcons are sitting there at 8. What, in your opinion, is the best case realistic scenario for them at pick number 8? So I know Aiden Hutchinson, obviously we want Aiden Hutchinson. He's not going to be there at 8, but what's a good realistic scenario, the best case realistic scenario for the team at pick number 8?
Well, probably the biggest bonanza would be the guy that I've heard from the very top that, and you guys probably heard some of this where there's some pessimism now about his work ethic and stuff like this is Thibodeau. Like sometimes you see this in a class where people start nitpicking, and then the kid will fall a little bit. I don't think Hutchinson, I just cannot see him falling that far because there's so much, there's built-in cost certainty there. He will not bust. He may not be, the best defensive end in football, but he will not bust. But Thibodeau, there's been more of the concerns about his work ethic and stuff. And so, and because of the top heaviness of this edge class, he might lose some tiebreakers to, both the Michigan kids, for instance, and then, depending on, the quarterbacks that go above or however the board shakes out above. That's the one that realistic I could see. And then the other one, right now, as we said now, this is going to be viewed as, as a reach. I don't think that this will be viewed as a reach in late April. My other slam dunk scenario would be Malik Willis. I think Atlanta is the absolute perfect scenario for him. You have the quarterback for one more year. You don't need to win next year. I mean, I know every NFL fan base is like, we got to win. But Atlanta, no matter what, is not winning a Super Bowl next year. I'm sorry. And I don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs next year. If you can get a guy whose upside is top 5 overall player in the entire NFL, which is what Malik Willis will be if he hits everything, if he hits that ceiling. And the only sort of, downside initially is, we can't use him for a year. Who cares? If you're Atlanta, who cares? Let Matt Ryan go out on his sword and do what he wants to do. Develop Malik Willis in the same way that the Chiefs, the plan was with Patrick Mahomes, in the same way with the Ravens, the plan was with Lamar Jackson. Nobody thought Lamar Jackson would be able to play in year one. And then there was that quarterback injury, and he ended up leading them to the playoffs. The other point I want to make about Malik Willis, but before we get off is, people talk about they'll talk about raw. Malik Willis is raw, right? Like raw. But what they're talking about, they're talking about overall utility when in fact what they're actually referencing is his passing game. Right. But there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to acquire yards. And we've seen over the past several years the value that Lamar Jackson's legs give to his offense. It's a real thing. It's like adding another additional running back onto the field. So now you're playing 12 on 11, in some ways. Atlanta fans know how this is with Michael Vick. In fact, one of the craziest things I ever saw in real life at a sporting event. My dad and I were at the Vikings Falcons game years and years ago when I was a little kid. That game where Michael Vick at the 50-yard line broke out of the pocket, in overtime. My dad and I started walking up the stairs as the play was still going because the game was over. Malik Willis has that same sort of a thing. And so the point I wanted to make on the way out is, whenever you hear someone this process saying, Malik Willis is raw, can we trust that he's raw? And then the sort of insinuation in your head is like, he could bust. I'm not sure if he can. How much inherent value you're getting from those legs, that's built in. That's not raw. That just is, right? Like he's going to be one of the 5 best scramblers at the quarterback position in NFL history, right? So that just is. Carson Strong, he's not a raw runner. He will never be able to run. His mobility is constantly going to be something that is going to affect his offense, that is just taken away. That for instance, another offense could have. You think about the discrepancies in value with that. When you're talking about the passer thing, yes. I mean, Malik could go all these different ways, but you already have gold with the one thing with him, right? And so then the other thing, we'll see. But I was saying this, in my Senior Bowl winner column, if you took away Malik Willis's ability to throw the ball and everything, he would be amongst this draft class's highest drafted running backs. As a running back, he athletically, you can compare him with any of those guys, right? He ran a 4.37 as a sophomore at Auburn. Power, quasi Lamar Jackson speed, quasi Jalen Hurts power as a runner. And that's how he's built. It's like the 6'0", 225 thing. And then the other thing is he would give you tremendous utility as a kick returner too. I mean, like you saw in that one run in the Senior Bowl where he's just weaving around. It's the ridiculous athleticism, it's power, and also vision. And again, he has one of the juiciest arms we've seen. Yes, it's special. For Atlanta fans, I'm sorry to say, to evoke this for you guys, but he's got one of the most juiced up arms that we've seen coming to the NFL since Michael Vick. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing with him that is I think you mentioned Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts is his floor, and you've seen
for sure.
Well, because Malik's arm is just light years better than Hurts' arm. So even if Malik's mechanics don't get fixed, is he going to be a worse passer than Jalen Hurts? I I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, Hurts what Hurts is better at, it's in the intermediate area of the field, and they did a lot of the RPO stuff. And yes, so, coming in, for sure, he was better at that. But like you said, the arm talent, it's no comparison whatsoever. Jalen Hurts isn't even in his world as far as, because with Malik Willis, when you start talking about the pure RPMs of that arm, you need to start comparing it to the best player at every class going back, right? Because that's the phylum you're in. And that's why he gets more of the comparisons, I think, to a guy like Josh Allen, because of how ridiculous the arm is, than, for instance, to Lamar Jackson, who I think his scrambling is a bit closer. They're not the same kind of a scrambler, but his utility as a scrambler is more in that direction. But just because of how juiced up that arm is. So, yeah, I mean, certainly the possibilities, as far as you just think of the football field, like a basketball court in terms of spacing and what that can do for other players. Because of Malik Willis, you have to have those safeties way back. You will never be able to put them in the box because that kid can throw it more than 70 yards downfield, no problem, right? So he can stretch you that far. But then you have this dynamic element of his scrambling. Again, for me, you combine the two things, you have to go back to Michael Vick with a guy that could compare on both of those planes.
Yeah, and it's if Malik Willis had stayed at Auburn and was Auburn's starter the last 2 years, he'd be a top 5 pick, no question.
Probably. Yep. Yeah.
It's because he's at Liberty. And we talked about this at the Senior Bowl, Liberty didn't do him any favors with the offense. They did not get him a good audition for the NFL. And when he finally now had a chance to go show what he could do in some semblance of an NFL offense, he lit it up at the Senior Bowl. He was the best quarterback there. So, I agree with you. I think fans should be more accepting of Malik Willis at 8. And there's a lot of obviously controversy with the Falcons because there's the people that really love Matt Ryan to the point where they wouldn't consider taking another quarterback. There's the people that really don't want to take a quarterback because they think it's a wasted pick because it's not going to help the team win in 2022, which is ridiculous because they're not, newsflash guys, they're probably not winning much in 2022 anyway. Now, maybe they'll make the playoffs because the NFC South is all of a sudden a complete dumpster fire. So, there's always that chance. But, are they really competing with the top flight teams in the NFL next year? No. This has always been a multi-year sort of retooling / rebuilding process. You could tell by the draft class last year, and I don't think they're all of a sudden going to change now because the division's more winnable. So if they're all in on Malik Willis, I mean, I'm there. I saw him in person, and you could call that recency bias or whatever you want, but, call me biased because I'm biased. So, but Thor, it's been great as always. We really appreciate you coming on. He is at Thorku. Anything you want to plug before we let you go?
Come check us out at NBC Sports Edge. We have all kinds of draft content, all the Senior Bowl stuff now, and we're going to be turning it in now. Looking forward to the Combine, at the beginning of March, late February, heading out to Indy. So that's the stuff coming next, mock drafts, everything like that. So come check us out, and like you mentioned, THORKU on Twitter.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, man, and I'm sure we will have you back on in short order, and Tyler as well. All right, so have a good night, man.
Sounds good. Appreciate you, boys.
Thanks,
all right, Adnan. Well, that was a lot of draft content. Appreciate you hanging out, and now we're here to talk about Falcon stuff because there was a lot of Falcons-related questions. I know people are asking about the recent sort of Calvin Ridley stuff as well as the sort of Cordarrelle Patterson rumors going around. So where would you like to start, Adnan? I'm going to give you the floor now because I've been talking a whole lot.
I think the Calvin Ridley news would probably be the biggest one at the moment. So yeah, we can start there, and it works with the draft because Thor was talking about how Thibodeau every year there's someone where they nitpick a little bit, and that's what happened. That's the entire reason why the Falcons got Calvin Ridley at 26 a few years ago, if I recall correctly, because he should have been a top 10 pick, no doubt.
Yeah.
Top 15, and he fell because of draft fatigue. So that'll be a nice segue into talking about how Calvin Ridley probably won't be on the team moving forward.
Yeah. So yeah, we will get to that in just one sec. I did want to read off one quick tip that I missed from Corey Carter with the $5. Thank you so much, Corey. He was weighing in on our previous discussion, saying that not as high on Hutchinson or Thibodeau. I feel like we need production immediately, and typically those defensive ends are not productive in year one. Neither of these prospects are more highly rated than Chase Young, and so far he's been underwhelming. Young was compared to LT. Yeah, Corey, I mean, I think that's fair if you just don't want an edge rusher, but like I said about in the Malik Willis conversation, I don't think this is like a 2022 focused draft for this team. I think they've said a lot about how they're trying to win, and they've got kind of gone out of their way to sort of obfuscate that. But I think if you look at their 2021 draft, they told you everything you needed to know. They did not draft a win now draft last year. And I think it pissed a lot of people off, which I understand. You know, Richie Grant barely played. Jalen Mayfield was a complete project. Ogundeji, who played a lot, he was also a complete project. Taquan Graham, total project. Darren Hall, project. Like every single pick almost was a project or a developmental guy. And I think we maybe need to recalibrate our expectations for this team. And we'll get a clue. We'll get some hints here soon, especially with this Ridley discussion we're about to have and other guys. But I think they're targeting 2023 at the earliest, sort of, as when they actually want to compete.
I also don't like the argument of our defensive ends aren't as like win now. You're gonna have to drop the defensive end.
You're gonna have to do it sometime.
You can't. It's not gonna work if you just rely on free agency for defensive ends, because that right now has become the second most expensive position in football after quarterbacks, maybe tied with franchise left tackles, because in a passing league, the most important thing outside of the passer himself is someone who can disrupt the passer and someone who can protect the passer. So you're gonna by that, if we just go by that, then we would literally never draft any defensive ends, and that's not the way you build a football team in the modern era of football.
Yeah, I agree. All right, on to the Calvin Ridley discussion. We did get some like vague, obviously still vague news dumps with regards to Ridley. They were talking about Arthur Blank was speaking about Ridley and that the team really hasn't even been able to talk to him. We're not exactly sure why. It might have something to do with his NFI designation. Blank was saying they'd love for him to stay in Atlanta. But it's sort of up to what he wants to do. And, Blank sort of acknowledged that Ridley might want a fresh start. And then Mike Garafolo, the reporter, did sort of answer a question saying that it's not that Ridley doesn't like the Falcons or he's mad at the organization. It's a personal reasons thing. So I don't know if that's that he wants to be closer to family, or that there's something going on in the city, or what's up with that. I mean, we just don't know. But for whatever reason, Ridley may want to go elsewhere, but it's not like this hate of the organization, or that there's some beef going on. I know that was speculated by some, but we'll see how that goes. But it does seem like the drumbeat is that Ridley is probably going to be traded. Now that Arthur Blank's sort of acknowledging that possibility, we've sort of acknowledged that possibility. I think, I can't speak for you, Adnan. I think I've sort of been leaning towards that he's probably going to get traded. Is that where you sort of were as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think he will get traded, and if a first round pick is coming back, I would pull the trigger, especially if that first round pick can be the main team that I keep looking at is the Patriots, and pick 21. And, that's a team that has had a lot of trouble drafting wide receivers in the past. A team that it would behoove them to give Mac Jones a very good number one option, because I don't think he has that right now.
Yeah, a proven guy too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but in all honesty, anywhere in that first round, I think we could drum up a little bit of a bidding war.
Yeah.
And if that happens, then thanks for everything, Calvin. But I'll take the first rounder. And either way, even if Ridley wasn't away from the team and had we had all of that which happened last year, I'm just at this point against paying a wide receiver big money. With Ridley even going into last season, I was of the mindset of, all right, if he doesn't sort of replicate what he was doing, a couple of years ago, where he was a second team All Pro, then yeah, I probably wasn't in the boat of, all right, let's give him that long term lucrative contract, because we've seen it. The teams that have given wide receivers those lucrative deals the past few years have come to regret it, and that includes the Falcons with that long-term deal that they gave to Julio Jones, which made him the richest wide receiver ever regarding guaranteed money. That's one of the big reasons why the Falcons are in this cap mess that they're in the first place. And Arthur Blank didn't help that situation at all. He sort of tied the front office's hands together with his absolutely dumb Falcon for life comments. So I'm glad that he's sort of learned from that, and that he's making his public statement, but I think he's stepping aside and letting the front office do what he hired them to do.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that I like Arthur Blank, is that I think obviously he's not a perfect owner. No owners really are, but he is sort of willing to learn from his mistakes. And I think he's approached this new regime differently. He's maybe a little bit more patient with things here, with letting them do this the right way. And on the topic of the Patriots, that's not just smoke. The Patriots really do want Calvin Ridley. That's all I'll say about that. But the Patriots really are in on Calvin Ridley, and I'm led to believe that they are the top suitor by far. They are seriously interested. They want him. I don't know what the compensation would be if pick 21 is really in consideration or what, but it's legit. Those rumors of the Patriots. So I think that one obviously makes the most sense. Who knows? I know folks have mentioned the Dolphins or whatever. The Dolphins don't have a first round pick, so that would be a little bit hard to swing, because I think the price for Ridley is and always has been a first round pick. Now, maybe the Falcons would be willing to accept a future first and maybe a day 2 pick this year, or another sort of early day 3 pick, in addition to a 2023 first. But I think the price is and has always been a first round pick minimum. And yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. The Patriots are bad at drafting receivers. They just are. They also need an instant impact contributor. And in this, unless you're going to pay like crazy for someone like Allen Robinson, who's probably going to be north of $20 million a year, there aren't really a lot of guys that I see hitting the market. I mean, technically Davante Adams is a free agent, but like, he's not going to hit the market. He's either the Packers will tag and trade him, or he'll go follow Aaron Rodgers wherever he goes. I don't think he's really.
Also, the Patriots spent a lot of money last year on those tight ends, who did not work out.
Yes.
And I do not think that they really are in the market to be paying Davante Adams $25+ million a year.
Exactly. So Ridley is fairly affordable this year with that 2 million or 0.3 million fifth year option. That yes is guaranteed, but they could trade for Ridley and then sign him to an extension that could even lower that cap hit even more. So I think he is by far like the cheapest option, and the class thins out super fast after Allen Robinson. Chris Godwin is technically an option, but he's coming off an injury. How soon is he going to be ready for next year? Like I said, Davante Adams not really in play. Probably, with that sort of money, maybe someone like Mike Williams, but again, probably going to be making big time money. So this isn't a great free agent wide receiver class other than those top few names. So it makes a lot of sense, and obviously the Dolphins are a name that's been floated. There's been a lot of hype about several teams. And the Raiders, I think, was another one. So like, it's entirely possible. I think it's very likely that he gets traded, and I think it will be a first round pick. But, I don't know that the Falcons are going to get a better offer than 21 from the Patriots for Ridley. But it's certainly something worth monitoring. And I think that's pretty fair compensation, honestly. I wouldn't be upset with that. Yeah. I think that's fair to both sides.
I would love 21 for Calvin Ridley. Like, yeah. I would, yeah, for sure. And then you could possibly you would have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds. Like
Yes.
that's how a team gets rebuilt. That's those are very very valuable swings that Fontenot will be setting himself up for. And you could replace Ridley with someone maybe like a George Pickens in the second round. I still don't think the Falcons will be going wide receiver in the first round, even if they had 21 and
Yeah.
2 first rounders. But who knows? Maybe one of those premium guys, maybe someone like a Karloftis even tumbles down the draft boards. You never know. I feel like there's going to be someone. There's going to be someone we don't expect who's going to fall down the draft. It happens every single year, and the Falcons could possibly position themselves. Uh, to take a high impact player at 8 and then to take one of those tumblers who has no business falling out of the top 12, maybe even at 21. And then all of a sudden you have maybe even 2 impact guys on defense. Maybe Tyler Linderbaum is the guy who takes the tumble, and you all of a sudden start to rebuild your offensive line a little bit. The possibilities are endless. There's a lot of doors that can be opened if the Falcons add another first round pick.
Yeah, I know someone mentioned the Chiefs too, at the end of the first round. I think that's fair as well. Yeah, I mean, I think if they do get that first round pick, whether it's 21 or later,
I think that Chiefs
um,
offense would be really, really scary in that
yeah,
case.
that would be really terrifying, which is exactly why it could happen. Um, yeah, I mean, I know, I think 21 would be more likely to be the receiver pick if they do go receiver in the first round. I know Traylon Burks has been getting some hype at 8, but I'm just not sure there's really a top 10 wide receiver in this class. I think there's a lot of first round wide receivers in this class. I'm not really sure there's like a top 10 type of guy here. They all have sort of some question marks. I do like Traylon Burks the best. Drake London's right there too. But yeah, I think at 21 or later in the first, that would be a great opportunity to add one of those guys if they wanted to, or they could try to wait a little bit. We talked about Christian Watson a lot, but that's another possibility on day 2. So we'll see how that goes, but it seems like it's continuing to move more towards the Falcons trading Ridley. And I guess I'm assuming we'll hear more and more about that as free agency gets closer. But right now it just seems like not much going on there, but that they're sort of intimating that he could be looking for a trade, and I think we all sort of expected that, but it's certainly notable. And then the other bit of news was, whether you believe in these sorts of things or not, that what was it? Patterson was sort of removing his Falcons social media ties and sort of, putting up posts about being prepared for free agency. So, it seems like the offer has not come in. So I don't know. We'll see. It's all social media nonsense. Who knows if any of it's real or whatever. But what do you think about the possibility that Patterson's not back? Do you put any stock in like social media scrubbing or changing or anything like that? What are you feeling about that?
Normally, I wouldn't. Sometimes there's some smoke, like with Kyler Murray. No, there was that big talk of Kyler Murray or like unfollowed the Arizona Cardinals on Instagram. Kyler Murray's not going anywhere. He's going to be a Cardinal next year. With Cordero Patterson, I think it's a little bit more legitimate just because this is a guy that has had a lot of communication through social media. He's someone that has publicly displayed his willingness and his desire to come back to the Falcons through social media, something that a lot of players haven't really done. So I'm not going to completely ignore it when he uses social media to say something like, I'm waiting for free agency, and when he unfollows the Falcons, because with Cordero Patterson, there's a lot more smoke there than, there would be otherwise. So I definitely think, or reading the tea leaves, that you're right, that the offer probably either hasn't come or maybe they couldn't come to terms. But uh, Sitting here right now, I'm a lot less confident that Cordero Patterson will be a Falcon in 2022 than I was 48 hours ago.
Yeah, it would be sad to see him go. I mean, and also the offense would be even more devastated then if they lose Ridley and Patterson. It's like literally your two best offensive players other than Kyle Pitts are going to be out the door. Um, so, it would be really rough to lose all that. But again, if they're willing to move Ridley and they're willing to let Patterson walk, it does sort of continue to display that this is a rebuild. Like, this is not this team trying to win in 22. This is like, we're going to take these picks. We're going to try to get maybe a comp pick for Patterson, which could be solid, depending on the type of offer that he gets. But yeah, it would be sad to lose him. I think it's great that he had an awesome year here. But, I mean, I think that they always liked him as sort of a buy low guy. And if his price really is that high and they're rebuilding, it's like, well, are we really going to be able to get the most out of him in the next, 2 or 3 years when he's in his prime? Or should we let him have an opportunity to go elsewhere and maybe, thrive and get better money too? So it's tough.
I definitely do think there is, well, with anyone, there obviously is a bit of a breaking point when it comes to negotiations, especially with Patterson, who is a running back. So, and I definitely think that Arthur Smith wants to draft his own guy long term, especially because Patterson is, sure, he's on the older side. He doesn't have as much traction on his tires as a regular running back in his 30s, but we saw it last year. He did start to break down a little bit toward the end of the season, just from the very heavy workload that he had. But yeah, all of this stuff on Twitter of, oh, give Cordero Patterson a blank check, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. At the end of the day, he's an over 30 running back. He could do other stuff other than being a running back, but
yeah, don't get me wrong, I want Patterson back, but if someone's offering him $8 million, then best of luck. I
think the Falcons could probably do $6 million per year, and that's it. And if he's hoping for more than that, I think he could get it elsewhere. But
yeah, and I think the Fontenot is going into this with a certain number in mind of, all right, we can work with you up until this number, but this has to be our best offer because there's other positions which are much more important that we need to take care of. And while the cap space isn't as dire as last season, it's still not great.
Yeah.
We're still some off seasons away from actual financial freedom when it comes to cap space.
Yeah. 2023 is a big one, and 2024 as well. But yeah, it's tough to swing it. I think you can make it work for a certain number, but anything more than that, it's going to hamstring you long term. And I agree with what you said. It's hard to justify spending that much money on a running back, even like a hybrid player like Patterson, when you have so many desperate needs elsewhere, just to get the offense functional. Even with Patterson, who was 50% of the scoring. I mean, it's like they were still not very good offense. They were still really not able to do much. And I think that they're probably going to draft a running back either way. They need to get a lot of new pieces in here. And I would hate to see Patterson go, but if the money is what he's chasing, if he's looking for a specific number, I'm not sure that the Falcons can match it. I don't think they can match the money of some of these teams that are probably going to be calling him. I just don't really see it. There could be, there are so many teams with more money. Like the Dolphins have a ton of money. Any of these teams could go out and sign him. So there's just maybe the Bears want him back. I don't know, so it'll be tough for the Falcons to get him. But the cap space is better, guys. Don't get me wrong, but it's not great still. They're going to be tight. And Patterson's one of those guys I had circled as I'm going to carve out space for him in my calculations. I'm going to consider him a priority guy to re-sign, but I was doing that at a $6 million number. And if they bring back Foye and Patterson and Isaiah Oliver and Thomas Morstead and Younghoe Koo. That's going to cost them $20 million right there just for those guys at their market rates. That's assuming they don't have to pay them more. That leaves them, even if they do all these moves that we're talking about, right? Like they cut Tyler Davison, they cut Mike Davis, they cut Kendall Sheffield, they trade Ridley, they trade Deion Jones, they restructure Matt Ryan with a void year restructure, and they extend Grady Jarrett. Even so, after all of those moves and all of these guys that they've re-signed, they'll have $14.8 million left. That's like enough for like one or two big free agents or like a handful of like mid-level guys. So that does include the draft class also, just so you guys know. But if they get an extra first-round pick, the draft class will be a lot more expensive too. So it does change things. It's there's not a lot of money to play around with. There's not a lot of wiggle room. So if they don't sign Patterson, that makes it so they have over $20 million in outside free agency money. And then you're like, oh, well, now you could get a top free agent on the offensive line, or you could get 3 to 4 mid-level guys that could really build out your depth or give you some starters at places that you really didn't have them before. So it just depends on what their priorities are. But if they really are focused on 2023 and beyond, it wouldn't shock me if they look at a player like Patterson, who is over 30, who is a running back, and they're like, look, by the time we're ready to win and would really be taking advantage of your talents, it's going to be pretty much the end of the road for you. And they're trying to maybe let him go elsewhere where he's going to have a better opportunity to make more money and probably have a little bit more success at this point. So, any final takes on either Ridley or Patterson or anyone else, Adnan, before we wrap it up tonight?
Yeah, and I mean, just with Patterson, I know that he's a fan favorite, and that's great, and we all have, he's a fan favorite on my end too. I really want him back with the Falcons, but sentimental stuff that doesn't win long term. Like it's great to have your guys, but you have to separate the business from the personal, and I think that the front office knows that. So if Cordero Patterson does end up leaving, it's definitely not the end of the world. Have trust in the front office. They haven't really done anything to warrant us not trusting them or to warrant a mistrust. But yeah, just generally speaking, with any of your favorite sports teams, the key to success normally isn't sentimentally valuing a guy, above what's practical.
Yeah. And that could apply to other guys too, like Foye. Like I assume they're going to prioritize getting Foye back and trading Deion, but I mean, we don't know. Like if they can't find anyone to take on Deion's contract, they might have to keep Deion and let Foye walk, So it's like, we don't know right now. Like there's so many things we don't know. There's so many guys that we're still sort of waiting to see. It's always sad to see these sort of fan favorite guys end up walking out the door. It's always sad, but it happens, especially when you get these good players, which is a good thing. That's how teams like the Ravens always get so many draft picks, and the Patriots. They have all these.
The Patriots always used to trade their guys 1 year too early before they move them 1 year too late.
Yeah.
And a lot of fan favorites went out the door in New England, but that's the franchise which had a lot of success.
Yeah. So, there's precedent for that happening, and of course, it is sad to see, but prepare for that, because if they really are committed to a rebuild instead of this little retooling, and they really are focusing on 2023 and beyond instead of 2022, I think that it's all on the table. They could let Foye walk for a comp pick and trade Deion, and then go into next year with Michael Walker and a rookie. It's maybe their strategy is to try to load up on comp picks this year. I don't know. I mean, they signed a lot of guys to 1 year deals last year out of necessity, but also not, because they could have signed more guys to multi-year deals, got those cap hits down even further, but they didn't. They went after these 1 year deals. So, I could definitely see a scenario where they're hoping that a lot of these sort of fringe guys they signed end up getting deals, and they can rake in some comp picks here. That's on the table. But that means they're probably not going to be very good in 2022 which I think is sort of, a distinct possibility. So, there's like the Falcons have a lot of free agents this year as a result. Like Dante Fowler, he's not going to go get huge money anywhere, but could he go get Vic Beasley got $8 million, coming off of a year where he did barely anything. So Dante Fowler is going to get something. Cordarrelle Patterson, we just talked about. Hayden Hurst, he's a possibility. Eric Harris and Deron Harmon, both solid guys, could go get some kind of money. I don't know if it's the type of money that's going to get a comp pick back, but there are guys that could end up netting this team comp picks if they decide to go that route. I don't know that I would go that hard that route. Like, you don't resign anybody, but it's
definitely root for Dante Fowler to make as much money as possible.
Yes,
next year.
exactly.
The more money he makes, the better the pick will be.
Yeah. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But, guys, I appreciate you sticking around for a long episode. We had a lot to talk about this week. There will be no show next week. I'm taking a quick vacation while the snow is still good up here before it gets too hot. So we will have no show next week. However, we will have a show tomorrow night. It's the next patron Q&A where we're going to have Dave Choate and I believe Adnan making another appearance as well.
Possibly. What time is it tomorrow?
I think it's 5.
5? Okay.
Yeah,
Possibly.
Tentative, yes.
You'll have to tune in to find out if I'm there.
Yes, you'll have to become a patron and tune in. But if you're interested in that, guys, the link is patreon.com/Falcoholic Live, I think. You get also some other exclusive perks, like if you prefer to listen to these shows in podcast format, you can get all of them on there. No ads, all that good stuff. You can also please like and subscribe, as usual. We really appreciate those metrics. Those help us out a lot. Also, leave comments on the shows. Apparently that helps the algorithm or something. I don't really get it, but, it does something for us, so we appreciate that. But, again, wanted to extend my appreciation to everyone who helped make the Senior Bowl happen. We came in extremely close to on budget, so that was very appreciated, whereas otherwise I would have had to pay a lot of it out of pocket. So I do want to express appreciation for that. It was a lot of fun. Learned a lot. Got a lot of good content out there for you guys. So thanks again. But yeah, guys, like I said, no show next week, but we'll be back the week after, hopefully with a special guest as well. And tomorrow night you can join us for the patron Q&A at 5 p.m. Eastern. Link to that will be on the Patreon page. But before we take off, Adnan, he's at Say Which Way. Anything you want to plug, Adnan?
I haven't really done much lately, actually.
Just making appearances on the show, that's appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. It was took a little bit of time off after the season.
Yep.
I did write the reviews for the guards and centers. I went a little in depth on those with PFF scores, on sacks allowed, pressure rate, all of that good stuff. So yeah, check that out on the page, and go to the Falcoholic for your one-stop shop of anything that you could ask for Falcons related over the entire offseason, because the NFL is a 365-day-a-year business. Because we're in the offseason doesn't mean that the content stops.
Exactly. The content never stops. The takes must flow at all times, guys. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic. Kevin, you can check out my latest mock draft that came out today. Spoiler alert, it was Jermaine Johnson at 8, so if you're mad about that, definitely go click on that article and leave a comment on there. That definitely will really show me if you were to do that. So there were other picks too that I thought were good, but nobody ever 100% likes a mock draft, so that's fair if you don't like it. But again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We will talk to you next time on the Falcoholic Live. We'll see all the patrons tomorrow night. Until next time, guys, enjoy your week. Enjoy the Super Bowl this weekend, and we will see you in a little bit. Have a great night, guys.
Good night, guys.